Johnny Carson exposed the 9 guests from the Golden Age who were genuinely wicked. Johnny Carson hosted America's biggest entertainers in living rooms all around the nation for 30 years. His easy chuckle and pleasant smile gave viewers the impression that they were seeing longtime friends catch up over coffee. However, Carson's smile frequently vanished after the cameras stopped filming and the crowd left for home. Those closest to America's favorite host claimed that he kept a mental blacklist of people he thought were genuinely awful. According to a former Tonight Show producer who collaborated with Carson for more than 10 years, Johnny was the ideal professional on camera. However, he would occasionally turn to Ed and mutter, "That person should never be near a camera or a child," as soon as we went to commercial. In his latter years, Carson became more open about the superstars he had secretly hated throughout his career. The unsettling picture of cherished icons, who were monsters behind their well-constructed public personas, is painted by the tales he shared with close pals. Carson's comments about a great actress who seemed kind and sensitive on his couch, but verbally abused a young production assistant backstage to the point where security had to step in, were the most startling. Additionally, Carson saw the well-liked male celebrity doing something in his dressing area that was so unsettling that the host almost phoned the cops. These weren't only demanding celebrities or tough personalities. Carson claimed that these were truly sinister individuals concealed beneath their talent and celebrity. For decades, the industry shielded predators, abusers, and manipulators. But first, we must comprehend the reason behind Carson's deepest distaste for the first name on his list, and the secret backstage altercation that has never been made public. First of all, I believe everyone is aware that I'm stage-struck. Second, I look for movies with audience identification. The Hollywood queen with ice in her veins was Joan Crawford. In 1970, Joan Crawford made an appearance on The Tonight Show, introducing audiences to the elegant Hollywood icon they had long adored. Crawford personified classic Hollywood glitz with her flawless posture, spotless beauty, and trained charm. However, a number of Tonight Show employees claim that Crawford's behavior off-camera showed a completely different person. "She was one of the coldest people I've ever interviewed," Carson allegedly said to his biographer years later, "like conversing with a stunning statue that is empty." Before Crawford ever reached the studio, her appearance started to cause issues. The show's technical director still maintained the 4-page document in his archives decades after she made her demands, which included precise lighting specifications. A previous producer remarked that everything had to be exact. The height of Johnny's desk, the angle of her chair, and even the studio's temperature, exactly 67 degrees, not 66 or 68. 3 hours prior to filming, Crawford finally showed up with her own makeup crew. Even though the program employed award-winning makeup artists, Crawford's treatment of people according to their significance was what really exposed her character. She practically curtsied to Johnny, a stagehand who was there that day remarked. But when a young production assistant accidentally entered her dressing room with water she had requested, Crawford exploded, according to many witnesses. Crawford's outburst was so violent that employees in the hallway halted in disbelief. She allegedly referred to the assistant, a 20-year-old woman who was just entering the field, as a stupid little, and advised her to look for work in a brothel where her ineptitude would be advantageous. Crawford requested that the young woman be dismissed after she ran away in tears. Tension persisted throughout the taping because Carson's producer refused. However, Crawford's handling of employees wasn't the most unsettling feature of her look. It was the deliberate manner she changed the instant the cameras came on. One producer noted that she was like a machine posing as a woman. Every response, every giggle, every unplanned moment had been practiced by her. Nothing was genuine. Crawford would suddenly stop smiling during commercial breaks and sit in silent, stone-faced quiet without talking to anyone. When the red light came back on, she would instantly come back to life. Carson, who was renowned for his ability to make visitors feel at ease, found it difficult to establish a genuine bond with Crawford. He allegedly told Ed McMahon after the broadcast, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Years later, Joan's alleged maltreatment of her adopted children was exposed in Christina Crawford's novel, Mommy Dearest. Carson didn't find it surprising. Close friends claimed that he only nodded and stated, "I saw who she really was in those few hours. I believe every word." However, if Carson was spooked by Crawford's cool calculating, he was far more unsettled by his next adversary. Threatened and frightened with raw might. I can respond to that by saying that I portray Frank Sinatra, the endearing bully Carson couldn't stand, or Daphne and Chloe in Those Wonderful Times. Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson seemed to have a nice, even warm, connection on TV. Carson served as the polite host while the iconic singer joked, told jokes, and occasionally performed. However, it is said that Carson secretly detested Sinatra. Not because of his skill, which Carson admired, but rather because of the way Old Blue Eyes handled people when he believed no one significant was there. According to some biographies, Carson once told a friend that he would be a mob enforcer if he didn't sing. At times, I believe he was both. The stress that Sinatra's Tonight Show performances caused was well known among the crew. Longtime employees claimed that Sinatra would show up with an entourage of up to 8 men, who were more like thugs you wouldn't want to encounter in an alley than show business types. These individuals would go around the studio, keeping an eye on the employees and fostering an environment that one cameraman compared to being watched. Carson was really troubled by Sinatra's treatment of those he considered beneath him. A floor manager made the error of giving Sinatra the customary 3-minute warning before his segment during one engagement in the early 1970s. "Nobody tells me when I've got 3 minutes. I'll go on when I'm ready," Sinatra said, grabbing the man by his tie and drawing him in, according to multiple witnesses. The floor manager, a 50-year-old Korean War veteran, was clearly frightened after the incident. Carson almost canceled the program when he spotted this exchange on his office monitor. Sinatra was only persuaded to proceed by the producer's reminder of the ratings he would generate. Sinatra's dependability, or lack thereof, was another point of contention. He allegedly canceled appearances at the last minute on several occasions, including once when he was in the building 2 hours before taping and decided he wasn't in the mood. The most damning incident occurred during a commercial break, when Sinatra made a derogatory remark about a female employee's attractiveness that was audible to everyone in the vicinity. "We don't talk about my staff that way here," Carson coldly retorted, violating his custom of professional detachment. Sinatra was clearly shocked that anyone, even Johnny Carson, would contradict him, and the tension was evident. Both men kept up their professional facades when the cameras came back, but crew members saw that Carson's queries were noticeably less focused and shorter. Carson reportedly instructed his producer, "I don't care what his ratings are. Limit him to once a year maximum," following his visit. This is especially noteworthy because Carson hardly ever participated in booking decisions and hardly ever blacklisted guests outright. His decision to limit Sinatra's appearances was a clear indication of how much he disliked the singer's actions. Carson's next troublesome guest showed a different kind of tough, the overbearing ego that knew no bounds or genres, whereas Sinatra portrayed the bullying side of star power. The world is filled, which is an argument against what I'm saying. The top young directors are all drenched. Orson Welles, the brilliant man who considered regulations to be unimportant. During the Carson period, Orson Welles made several appearances on The Tonight Show, consistently creating unforgettable television with his powerful voice, commanding presence, and incredible tales from his illustrious career. At home, viewers witnessed a nice and intelligent racer. Carson and his employees saw something different. A man whose ego had swelled to such an extent that he felt he was exempt from the laws of television. Carson allegedly replied, "Never again," following a particularly challenging Welles appearance. "That guy thinks he's still running Rome." The problems typically began before Welles even arrived at the studio. According to Tonight Show writers, Welles routinely dismissed any prepared questions or topics Carson's team had developed. "He told us our questions were pedestrian and obvious," a former writer said. He returned an empty page after physically crossing them all out. Because of this, Carson was forced to conduct an interview with one of the most important individuals in film without any prior planning or structure. Welles's propensity to dive into long, meandering stories that were hard to trim for time presented a unique problem. Welles was booked for a 7-minute part during one performance in the middle of the 1970s. He ignored several subliminal clues from Carson that it was time to wrap up and remained on the couch for almost 25 minutes. A director stated that as time was running out, Johnny would send guests a series of signals. Welles simply continued chatting after seeing them all. 2 other visitors had to be completely bumped. Welles treated employees with the same contempt. Even when production staff were standing right next to him, he allegedly refused to address them personally, and instead spoke to them in the third person. Ask the boy to change the light, or tell the girl I need more water. Those who knew Carson well said that he was especially annoyed by Wells's tendency to treat The Tonight Show more like his own platform than as Carson's show. Orson would try to steer camera shots from his seat, introduce props, and abruptly switch topics. He once actually stood up and tried to tell our camera operators which angles to use. Johnny was livid, a former producer explained. Genius doesn't excuse everything, Carson allegedly told Ed McMahon following a particularly difficult appearance. Being brilliant doesn't give you the right to hijack someone else's show. As a perfectionist when it came to television production, Carson thought Wells's disrespect for the limitations of the medium was particularly flawed. In private, he started to see Wells as a warning about what happens when brilliance is overshadowed by ego, even if he continued to revere Wells's enormous achievements in film. Wells symbolized the difficulty of managing an excessive personality, but Carson's next challenging visitor offered a different issue. Unpredictable actions that have the potential to swiftly become hostile are represented by light bulbs. I mean, aside from a temperament that mostly consists of Hollywood's verbal aggression queen, Bette Davis. Audiences witnessed the renowned actress at her most captivating when she came on The Tonight Show. She was full of intriguing Hollywood history, graceful even in her later years, and told clever anecdotes in her unique voice. The times before and after the red light appeared, when Davis allegedly displayed a personality, were what they were unable to witness. Be so harsh that even the unflappable Carson was shocked. Carson allegedly told Ed McMahon, "She doesn't need a stage, she needs a courtroom," following one especially challenging appearance. No one should have to be cross-examined by Bette Davis without a lawyer present. Several Tonight Show staff members claim that Davis's handling of other guests was her first transgression. When Davis was scheduled to appear on shows with other celebrities, he frequently talked over or interrupted them, particularly if they were female or younger actors. On the couch, she would physically turn away from other people. If someone else was telling a story that got laughs, you could see her seething, planning how to regain control, recalled a former talent coordinator. Davis's actions were even more troublesome behind the scenes. Before appearances, she allegedly insisted on having whiskey in her dressing room. Her drinking occasionally resulted in inappropriate remarks and actions, which was not unusual for guests of her era. Female employees who worked on the show in the 1970s claimed that Davis frequently used racist and sexist language that was shocking even by the norms of the period. According to one makeup artist, Davis turned down her offer and asked for someone whose hands wouldn't tremble after 3 days of drinking. When Davis started berating a cue card holder for moving too slowly during a practice, Carson, who usually avoided conflict, made an exception for her. According to a production assistant who saw the incident, Johnny truly intervened. "Miss Davis, on this show we speak to everyone with respect, or we don't speak at all," he whispered to her. She was taken aback and likely wasn't used to being challenged, but she gave in. Carson found Davis especially challenging because of the contrast between her evident brilliance and how she treated other people. In contrast to other challenging visitors who could be written off as untalented, Davis was a true legend whose work Carson respected. Carson allegedly warned his producer, "That's the last time," during her final appearance on the show in the early 1980s. No matter how many Oscars Bette Davis has, life is too short to spend it being verbally abused by her. Although Davis at least targeted adults who could defend themselves with her jabs, Carson's next troublesome guest displayed a different kind of uncomfortable behavior toward young women that went beyond professional bounds. A few too, yes of course. "I'll make you tall and powerful." The elderly kid star with wandering hands is Mickey Rooney. As the top box office performer from 1939 to 1941 and a living reminder of the industry's heyday, Mickey Rooney was considered Hollywood royalty. His Tonight Show appearances ought to have been sentimental commemorations of a distinguished career. Rather, Rooney's visits became infamous for his outrageous behavior, wild energy, and sporadic drinking, according to several staff testimonies. After one especially troublesome appearance in the mid-1970s, Carson allegedly informed his producer that he believes being short gives him permission to be a pervert. Rooney, who was in his mid-50s at the time, gained a reputation among female employees for making sexual remarks, touching people without permission, and disregarding professional boundaries. Many reports state that when young production assistants found out Rooney was booked, they would request to be moved. According to a former assistant who worked on the show in the late 1970s, he would try to pull you closer, hold your hand when you handed him water, and inquire whether you were married. He would cling to your wrist a bit too long if you attempted to get away. Rooney's seeming inability to identify when he had consumed too much alcohol was even more worrisome. Employees of The Tonight Show claim that he was obviously drunk on at least 3 different appearances, slurring words and losing his train of thought in the middle of sentences. In one notorious part from 1977, Rooney started sharing an anecdote about Judy Garland, but it soon turned improper, so Carson had to interrupt him and change the subject. Carson allegedly asked his producer, "Is he drunk, or is this just who he is now?" during the commercial break. Carson found Rooney especially challenging because of the generational divide in what was considered proper conduct. Rooney, who was born in 1920, grew up in a time when certain behaviors toward women were typical in Hollywood, if not approved. A director who worked on the show for many years noted that while Johnny was not a prude, he had clear lines about professional conduct. When confronted about his actions, Rooney appeared genuinely perplexed, as if he didn't see why it was an issue. Carson took the rare step of personally apologizing to a young actress who was also on that night's show after Rooney made repeated remarks about her. "I've never seen Johnny so embarrassed by a guest's behavior," the director said. "That's not how professionals act on my show, and it won't happen again," he assured her. As promised, Rooney's appearances decreased in the late 1970s and early 1980s. When Rooney was booked, Carson allegedly insisted on midday pre-tapings rather than live nighttime broadcasts. While Rooney's actions led to awkward situations, Carson's next tough visitor presented a different kind of challenge. They became renowned among the workforce due to their excessive and irrational demands. "Yes, I don't believe my previous marriage was one day, and I didn't anticipate it lasting that long." The diva that made Carson hopeless was Zsa Zsa Gabor. Zsa Zsa Gabor was a Tonight Show favorite, making numerous appearances during Carson's tenure thanks to her glitzy appearance, unique accent, and flirting demeanor. Viewers witnessed a charming, extravagant personality who made fun of her Hungarian heritage and numerous marriages. According to multiple crew testimonies, Gabor was one of the most unpleasant and demanding guests in the history of the show. After a particularly taxing Gabor appearance, Carson allegedly joked, "I'd rather interview a cat. At least the cat wouldn't need 3 assistants and special lighting." Gabor's demands started long before she got to the studio, according to former Tonight Show employees. Her writer read like a parody of celebrity demands, recalled a former talent coordinator, "and we thought it was a joke the first time we got it." Her standard requirements included a dressing room temperature of 74 degrees, fresh flowers, orchids only, no carnations, a bottle of Perrier water with precisely 3 ice cubes, and her own lighting technician flown in at the show's expense. No female guests under 40 were scheduled for the same episode. One of the most notorious incidents involved Gabor arriving for a taping and finding that the makeup department didn't have her preferred brand of foundation. According to multiple witnesses, Gabor got into a shouting match with the head makeup artist, demanding that someone be sent to Beverly Hills immediately to purchase the correct product. Johnny actually had to intervene, a former producer recalled, calling her directly and saying something like, "Zsa, honey, you look beautiful already, and we have a show to do. Let's postpone the urgent cosmetics issue till later." Carson reportedly told his executive producer, "Next time she wants to be on, tell her we've renamed the show The Tonight Show, starring Zsa Zsa Gabor, and I'll be happy to be her sidekick." In response to Gabor's actions, which caused other guests to be kept waiting, crew members to put in extra hours, and the show's meticulously planned schedule to go into disarray. Although Gabor's diva demands caused logistical challenges, Carson's next difficult guest caused a different kind of discomfort. Despite these frustrations, Gabor continued to appear on the show throughout Carson's tenure, a testament to her unquestionable entertainment value when the cameras were actually rolling. Cow, the annoying mother. Shelley Winters, the unpredictable powder keg. Shelley Winters was a 2-time Oscar winner with a career spanning decades, from glamorous roles in her youth to character parts in her later years. On paper, she should have been a perfect Tonight Show guest, but her unpredictable behavior could easily turn a lighthearted interview into an uncomfortable confrontation. Experienced, successful, and full of Hollywood tales, Winters was actually one of Carson's most erratic and volatile guests, according to those who worked on the show. She doesn't talk. She detonates, Carson allegedly remarked following one particularly explosive appearance. Wurs became infamous among the show's staff for her inability or unwillingness to adapt to the light, entertainment-focused format of late-night television. She would frequently get into heated political diatribes or extremely personal admissions that clearly unnerved Carson, rather than offering humorous anecdotes or promoting ongoing projects. During one appearance in the mid-1970s, what started out as a straightforward inquiry about a recent movie swiftly turned into a 5-minute unbroken rant against government corruption, leaving Carson straining to find a lighthearted way to switch to a commercial. Johnny was an expert at manipulating dialogue. However, a past director said that working with Shelley was like attempting to control a tornado. All he could do was wait for her to lose steam once she began rolling. Winters' erratic behavior extended beyond her conversational subjects. She also gained notoriety for having physical outbursts. She famously hurled a glass of whiskey in the face of fellow guest Oliver Reed on a British chat program after he made sexist remarks. The crew felt anxious whenever she was scheduled because of her reputation for instability. "We would actually remove certain items from the set when we knew she was coming," a former stage manager acknowledged. Despite these difficulties, Winters stood out from some of Carson's other challenging guests because her actions appeared to be motivated more by genuine passion than by vanity or malice. Anything that could be thrown or knocked over would mysteriously disappear before her segments. Regardless of the suitability of the setting, she considered every public appearance as a chance to discuss political and social concerns because she had strong feelings about them. Carson respected Winters' genuineness, even though she was clearly uncomfortable during her more intense moments. Carson reportedly told his producer, "I may not want to vacation with her, but at least she means every word she says," following a particularly heated appearance in which she criticized the Vietnam War. However, Winters' appearances became less frequent in the latter years of Carson's tenure, as the host preferred guests whose conversational style complemented rather than challenged the format of the show. While Carson's next challenging guest represented something he really detested, Winters' impassioned unpredictability produced on-air issues. Extreme political beliefs that targeted those in need. "I enjoy red core puzzles and large muscles. I admire the stunning Jane Russell, the celebrity whose politics Carson found intolerable." One of the most famous sex symbols in Hollywood during the 1940s and 1950s was Jane Russell. Renowned for movies like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and The Outlaw, she appeared to be a logical regular guest for The Tonight Show due to her remarkable beauty and important role in movie history. However, Russell seldom came back to Carson's couch after a few appearances in the early 1970s. According to show insiders, Carson was uncomfortable with Russell's increasingly radical political beliefs and her alleged treatment of LGBTQ+ employees. Despite being a moderate Republican for the majority of his life, Carson strictly adhered to The Tonight Show's policy of being largely impartial on contentious political matters. However, Carson apparently found it unsettling because Russell expressed hardline conservative beliefs in backstage conversations. "Johnny could handle guests having different political opinions," a former producer said. What bothered him was when those opinions turned into personal attacks on staff members or other guests. According to multiple accounts, Russell gained notoriety for making derogatory remarks about LGBTQ+ people who worked on the show. During one appearance in the early 1970s, she allegedly refused to allow a gay makeup artist to touch her face and demanded a replacement. Even more concerning to Carson was an incident involving Rock Hudson. According to a talent coordinator who worked on the show, Russell refused to be booked on the same episode as Hudson and made disparaging remarks about his sexuality, which were known in Hollywood circles but were not publicly acknowledged at the time. He was ahead of his time in not tolerating that kind of discrimination on his show, the talent coordinator recalled, adding that Johnny had many connections in the LGBT world, including multiple employees. Russell's dismissive remarks about civil rights legislation during a commercial break in 1973, which were overheard by multiple crew members and allegedly reached Carson's ears, are said to have been Carson's final breaking point with her. Following that appearance, Russell was conspicuously absent from The Tonight Show's guest roster for the remainder of Carson's tenure, which is one of the few instances where Carson appears to have personally vetoed future bookings. Carson's general reluctance to outright ban guests, particularly those with Russell's level of star power and historical significance to Hollywood, made this situation particularly noteworthy. Although Russell's politics and treatment of staff caused a lasting rift with Carson, his final and possibly most intense dislike was reserved for a comedian whose public persona and private behavior were reportedly worlds apart. I've never asked you this, but I'm asking you now simply, purely. Jerry Lewis was one of America's most successful entertainers. Behind the scenes, according to multiple Tonight Show staff accounts, Lewis was also one of the most difficult, demeaning celebrities in Hollywood, earning him a special place on Carson's personal blacklist. He's what happens when ego outruns talent, Carson reportedly told a colleague, following a particularly problematic Lewis appearance in the mid-1970s. Lewis was a groundbreaking comedian, actor, director, and humanitarian known for his annual telethons benefiting muscular dystrophy research. Lewis allegedly made no secret of his contempt for Carson, in contrast to some challenging visitors who reserved their worst behavior for subordinates. In one notorious appearance, Lewis frequently interrupted Carson, stole questions meant for other attendees, and even reached over to change Carson's tie without permission, a gesture that clearly irritated the normally unflappable host. Johnny detested having his body touched without his consent. It was a well-known rule. You don't touch Johnny unless he initiates it, a former producer clarified. Lewis was aware of this and used it as a power move. It is said that Lewis treated crew members even worse. He would say, "Hey, you," or by their function, camera guy, makeup girl, regardless of their experience or seniority, according to multiple stories, refusing to learn the names of staff members. During Lewis's practice, a camera operator allegedly coughed softly, which was one particularly unsettling episode. Several witnesses claimed that Lewis halted everything and went on a rampage, yelling that the cameraman was a professional who breathed like an amateur and insisting that he be taken out of the studio. According to a floor manager present, Jerry yelled at a camera operator for breathing too loudly. Breathing, not speaking. He had allergies, poor guy. The disparity between Lewis's public image as an unwavering advocate for children and his private actions toward those who couldn't further his career was what Carson found most offensive about him. According to a producer who collaborated closely with Carson, the Jekyll and Hyde routine made Johnny's skin crawl. He had come to our show and treated folks as if they were less than human after witnessing Jerry cry on his telethon about loving children. Carson reportedly told his executive producer, "Never again," following Lewis's last appearance on The Tonight Show in the early 1980s. Although Carson rarely explicitly banned guests, Lewis became one of the few celebrities who were essentially barred from the show in its last 10 years. When questioned about Lewis at a private dinner years later, Carson allegedly said something that stunned everyone in attendance with its unusual severity. He stands out as really hostile in a community full of fakes, and that takes work. Carson's blacklist illustrates the real nature of Hollywood. Johnny Carson's private feelings regarding these 9 problematic guests. A unique, unvarnished look into Hollywood's reality beneath the meticulously preserved facade of glitz and charm is provided by Joan Crawford, Frank Sinatra, Orson Welles, Betty Davis, Mickey Rooney, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Shelley Winters, Jane Russell, and Jerry Lewis. According to a seasoned Tonight Show producer, Johnny saw everything. Every big celebrity had to go through him in order to reach the American public for 30 years. He could tell who was sincere and who wasn't. Carson had no incentive to fabricate or embellish unfavorable stories, which makes his evaluations very valuable. Carson was at the top of the entertainment business, unlike tabloid journalists or irate workers. By criticizing these superstars, he had nothing to gain and everything to lose if his candor strained ties with prospective guests. According to his former producer, Johnny had no intention of making enemies. On the contrary, he wanted each interview to go well. When he didn't like someone, it was because they had made it hard for him not to. Carson had a unique view on celebrity society because of his dual role as a gatekeeper and a confessor to the stars. For 30 years, celebrities showed aspects of themselves on his sofa that they wouldn't show anywhere else, fostering a relationship of trust that increased the significance of Carson's personal assessments. Carson's ability to discern between guests who were merely challenging and those he deemed to be genuinely problematic is perhaps the most illuminating. He put up with quirkiness, anxiety, and even a modest ego. The realm of renown brought with it an understanding of these. Cruelty was something he could not tolerate, especially when it came to people who were less powerful. Recalling his longtime director, Johnny had a straightforward test. How did they handle the men operating the cameras, the helpers, and the pages? That gave him all the information he required about a person's personality. Many of Carson's personal beliefs have been supported by more general disclosures about these celebrities in the years since his death in 2005. Christina Crawford's claims on Joan, her mother. Numerous sources have confirmed reports of Mickey Rooney's inappropriate behavior and Sinatra's ties to organized crime. This implies that Carson wasn't merely passing judgment. He was spotting real character defects that Hollywood's publicity apparatus had worked hard to hide from the general audience. The most alarming part of Carson's blacklist is how well the studio system shielded these superstars, even though industry insiders were aware of their actions. Stars could maintain impeccable public personas while acting horribly in private long before social media and cancel culture. Safe in the knowledge that the studios, networks, and periodicals all had a stake in keeping them marketable. A former Tonight Show writer noted that a single cell phone video could now kill a career. A chair could be thrown at an assistant back then, and the tale would never escape the building as long as they sold tickets. Carson's frank evaluations serve as a helpful reminder that our cultural giants have always been flawed, complex people, as we nostalgically reflect on Hollywood's heyday. Behind their carefully constructed public personalities, they might be inspiring, disappointing, or even genuinely unsettling. The camera doesn't just add 10 pounds, Johnny used to say. His longtime producer remarked, it adds a layer of fiction. Seeing through that facade to the underlying truth was his greatest talent, not simply conducting interviews. I appreciate you viewing this examination of Johnny Carson's most challenging visitors. For more in-depth explorations of entertainment history, please subscribe and like this video if you thought this trip inside the golden age of television was insightful. If these Tonight Show disclosures startled you, wait till you see our following video, which reveals the renowned comedy from the 1980s in which the child star, whose adorable on-screen antics concealed violent outbursts so severe that producers built panic buttons on set, surreptitiously harassed the ensemble. To ensure you don't miss the next shocking Hollywood exposé, click the bell button.